So, what happens when the frontal lobe is not functioning as it normally should? This deficit is famously exemplified in the case of a railway foreman who unfortunately had a really bad day in the mid 1800s while on the job. The story of Phineas Gage was submitted by the attending physician John Harlow and later published in the New England Journal of Medicine. Now, Phineas Gage was using this large iron rod in a process to essentially direct an explosion into either a rock or a boulder or into the earth. And in this case, they were clearing a pathway for a railroad track to pass through. Now, this tamping iron is pretty sizable. It was 3 feet 7 inches in length, just over 13 pounds, and pointed at the end. During the incident, he was charging the hole with the gunpowder and using the tamping iron to pack down the gunpowder before putting in sand to cover the area that they were about to demolish. While he was tamping this powder, he turned his head to look after his men, which took his eyes off of where he was supposed to be packing down the powder with the tamping iron, and then accidentally hit the rock, which created a spark, ignited the powder, sending the tamping iron through the left side of his face. The phenomenal part of this story is that he told it himself to the doctor. Remarkably, he survived, as you can see in the photograph of him, and the scientific community was able to take away quite a few insights from his accident. His doctor, John Harlow, kept a very nice log about his observations while with Phineas Gage and was able to gather information from family and friends to compare Phineas' behavior both before and after the injury. So let's take a look into this account a little deeper. So again, this is from Dr. Harlow's publication in the New England Journal of Medicine from 1848 entitled Passage of an Iron Rod Through the Head regarding the information he gathered about Phineas Gage's behavior before the incident. And just a quick note here, these next 3 slides are a bit wordy, but I promise they are relevant and valuable. So I'm just going to read the quote here. Phineas was the most efficient and capable foreman. He possessed a well-balanced mind and was looked upon by those who knew him as a shrewd, smart businessman, very persistent in executing all his plans of operation. So let's dissect this a bit. What can we find within this? Now, Phineas was a foreman, so it's most likely safe to say that someone along the way must have trusted his character enough to place him in a position to supervise other humans. He was efficient. He had good judgment. He was intelligent. He was capable of forming sound plans. And importantly, he finished the plans that he started. And keep this in mind for later. And these are all traits that parents would be proud of their children having. So now we've got our baseline for how Phineas conducted himself before the incident. Let's see how Phineas's behavior changed, or if it changed at all, during and after the incident. So this is a continuation of the excerpt by Dr. John Harlow in the New England Journal of Medicine in 1848. So Phineas spoke within a few minutes. He got out of the cart himself and with a little assistance walked up a long flight of stairs into the hall where he was dressed. He recognized me at once, and he said he hoped he was not much hurt. He seemed to be perfectly conscious, but was getting exhausted from the hemorrhage, which was very profuse both externally and internally, the blood finding its way into the stomach, which rejected it as often as every 15 or 20 minutes, pulse 60 and regular. So this guy has a 13-pound iron rod in his head, and he's speaking within just a few minutes after the injury. He's able to walk not only by himself and not only on flat surfaces, but also up long flights of stairs. Many people on the scene couldn't help but wonder, how is Phineas not dead already? It seems reasonable to wonder, how can we damage a structure this drastically that's supposed to keep us alive, yet at this point, death seems to be far from the case. Now, the accident happened at around 4 p.m. in the afternoon, and his doctor didn't arrive until about 6 p.m., so about 2 hours had passed. When Dr. Harlow did arrive, Phineas recognized his doctor was, 1, a physician, by the way he looked, the tools that he carried, his mannerisms, and 2, his physician. He was also polite and courteous, as we can see. He was, as one might expect, becoming tired from losing a large amount of blood. He was vomiting 3 or 4 times an hour, which is also expected since your stomach despises blood. His pulse was within the lower range of normal at 60 and was occurring at regularly spaced intervals, which, given the physical demands of working on a railroad, is in line with what we'd expect. So far, this behavior and these vital signs don't seem to be drastically different from someone without a giant hole through their cranium. Let's take a look at how his behavior changed from baseline after he was healed up and some time had passed since the incident. Now, this account was also written by Dr. Harlow in his article submission under the title Recovery from the Passage of an Iron Bar Through the Head, and was done so in 1848, 20 years following the incident, after he both regularly observed Phineas directly and gathered information from those who were closest to him. So, to the quote, "He is fitful, irreverent, indulging in the grossest profanity, manifesting but little deference for his fellows, impatient of restraint or advice when it conflicts with his desires, at times pertinaciously obstinate, yet capricious and vacillating, devising many plans of future operation which are no sooner arranged than they are abandoned in turn for others appearing more feasible." Take a moment to analyze any inferences that you might be able to make here. What Dr. Harlow found was that Phineas's behavior was fundamentally different from the baseline which we previously discussed. He now suffered from aggressive outbursts. He was moody, profane, inconsiderate, disrespectful. He didn't entertain ideas that conflicted with his own, and he almost immediately changed the ideas and plans that he did come up with. Whereas before, we get the idea that he was this, poster child of stability, professionalism, and level-headedness. Now, he has this sort of unpredictable, erratic, and adolescent, it's his way or the highway, loose cannon type behavior. And these mannerisms are in stark contrast to the accounts given by his friends and family before the incident. And in fact, it was so different and bad that the company could not rehire him. And I think this is very sadly captured in the next quote, which is that his mind was radically changed, so decidedly that his friends and acquaintances said he was no longer Gage. So, how does this behavior compare with who Phineas Gage purportedly was, and what does this tell us about the function of the frontal lobe? So, maybe it's logical to infer that the frontal lobes are responsible for these functions that Dr. Harlow and Phineas Gage's friends and family noted the changes in. And as it turns out, this generally is the case. So, in summary, we took a man who had a terrible accident and compared how the frontal lobe damage changed his behavior from who he was before the incident.